Ever wondered how a man could earn enough money to declare war on his own country? Enter Pablo Escobar, the notorious Colombian drug lord. Born in the year 1949 in the small town of Rio Negro, Colombia, Pablo's story is one that begins humbly, far from the extravagant wealth and power he would later amass. Raised in a modest family, young Pablo was a far cry from the man he would become. In these early years, no one could have guessed that this boy, growing up in the poverty-stricken barrios of Rio Negro, would rise to become one of the world's wealthiest and most feared men. But even in his youth, Pablo displayed an entrepreneurial spirit, albeit on the wrong side of the law. His first steps into the world of crime were relatively small-scale, yet telling of the path he would tread. From petty thefts to smuggling contraband cigarettes, the young Escobar was dipping his toes into the murky waters of the underworld. His ventures grew bolder with time. He began dealing in fake lottery tickets, a scam that proved lucrative and offered a taste of the big money operations he would later mastermind. This was not a man content with small-time hustles. Pablo was ambitious, determined, and undeterred by the law. From this point on, there was no turning back. The boy who once roamed the streets of Rio Negro, without a peso to his name, was now a man with a vision, a plan, and an insatiable hunger for wealth and power. His rise was meteoric, and his methods ruthless. But this was just the start. The humble beginnings of a kingpin had been laid, and the world was yet to see the full scale of Pablo Escobar's empire. From the streets of Rio Negro, a kingpin was born, but the journey was only just beginning. In the world of crime, Escobar didn't just play the game, he changed the rules. Pablo Escobar, a name synonymous with the notorious Medellin cartel, didn't just wake up one day to find himself at the helm of an infamous empire. No, the rise of the Medellin cartel was a calculated and methodical journey that began in the late 70s. It was a time when the world was changing, and Escobar saw an opportunity that he seized with both hands. His empire was built on the white gold that was cocaine. But it wasn't just about the product, it was about the method. Escobar was an innovator, a mastermind who revolutionized the smuggling game. He didn't stick to the traditional methods of smuggling. No, he created his own playbook. From using small planes to transport drugs across borders to hiding cocaine in shipments of flowers, Escobar was always one step ahead of the game, leaving law enforcement agencies scrambling in his wake. But it wasn't just about the smuggling, it was about the production. The Medellin cartel controlled the entire supply chain, from the coca leaves in the fields of Colombia to the powdery substance on the streets of Miami. The Medellin cartel had their hands in every part of the process. This end-to-end control not only gave them power but also unparalleled profits. And these profits were astronomical. In the 80s, the Medellin cartel was said to control about 80% of the cocaine that was smuggled into the United States. Think about that for a moment. 8 out of every 10 lines of coke in the US were courtesy of Escobar and his crew. Escobar's empire grew rapidly, with the Medellin cartel becoming a household name in the world of crime. His influence and power spread far and wide, crossing borders and oceans. His name struck fear into the hearts of many, and admiration in the eyes of some. Escobar's empire was not built in a day, but when it was worth billions. How rich was Pablo Escobar? Imagine spending $2,500 a month just on rubber bands to wrap your cash. In the mid-1980s, Escobar rode the crest of his wealth and influence. He was so flush with cash, Forbes magazine listed him as one of the world's billionaires. To give you a sense of the sheer scale of his fortune, consider this. It was estimated that he was making an astonishing $22 billion a year. That's more than the GDP of some small nations. But what does one do with such an absurd amount of money? Well, if you're Pablo Escobar, you create your own private wonderland. He built a sprawling estate that he called Hacienda Nápoles. This wasn't just a mansion, it was a kingdom. It featured everything from luxury cars and airplanes to a private zoo filled with exotic animals from around the globe. The scale of Escobar's wealth was so immense it became a logistical nightmare. He had so much cash, literally, that he couldn't store it in banks. Instead, he stashed it in warehouses, buried it in fields, and even hid it within the walls of his properties. It's been said that he spent $2,500 a month just on rubber bands to bundle his mountains of cash. And here's a fun fact for you. Escobar's wealth was so vast and his cash storage methods so primitive that he wrote off 10% of his earnings each year because rats would eat it. or it would be damaged by water or lost. But with all this wealth and power, Escobar was living on borrowed time. He was a marked man, pursued by law enforcement agencies from around the world. His life was a paradox, a testament to the heights a man can reach and the depths he can plunge into. At his peak, Escobar was one of the world's richest men. But money can't buy you everything, can it? Every reign has an end, and for Escobar, it was a violent one. Pablo Escobar, once the most feared and revered man in Colombia, began to feel the pressure of his illicit empire closing in on him. In 1991, he surrendered to the authorities, a move as shocking as it was strategic. You see, Escobar wasn't one to go down without a fight. He negotiated his own surrender, securing a deal that allowed him to build his own prison, La Catedral, on a hilltop surrounded by lush greenery. A prison that was more luxury resort than correctional facility. But even the gilded cage of La Catedral couldn't hold the kingpin for long. Escobar escaped in July of 1992, just a year after his surrender. The irony here was as palpable as the Colombian heat. The man who had once ruled an empire was now a fugitive, hunted not just by Colombian authorities, but also by rival cartels, vigilante groups, and even foreign agencies. The chase was relentless, the hunters closing in, and on December 2, 1993, the inevitable happened. Escobar, the man who had lived by the bullet, died by the bullet in a rooftop shootout. His vast fortune, estimated to be around $30 billion, couldn't shield him from the fatal shot, nor could it protect the empire he had built. In the end, it wasn't just the man who fell, but the entire Medellin cartel. The organization that had once controlled 80% of the cocaine sent to the United States crumbled without its kingpin. From kingpin to fugitive, Escobar's reign ended as violently as it began. An empire built on fear and bloodshed, on riches beyond imagination, came crashing down. It's a grim reminder that the trappings of wealth and power are often fleeting, and that even the mightiest can fall. What happens when a man with unimaginable wealth and power falls? He leaves behind a legacy that's hard to forget. And that's precisely what happened with the notorious kingpin, Pablo Escobar. Escobar's reign may have ended, but the echoes of his exploits continue to reverberate through the annals of time. His wealth, once estimated to be in the ballpark of $25 billion, was so immense that some of it is still being discovered today. Imagine finding a stash of millions buried in your backyard. That's what it's like in some parts of Colombia. A rather unusual kind of treasure hunt, wouldn't you agree? But the legacy of Escobar extends far beyond the buried treasure. His life, as infamous as it was, sparked an industry of its own, a rather peculiar one, known as narco-tourism. This term refers to the tourism centered around visiting sites related to drug trafficking, particularly in Medellin, Escobar's former stronghold. Now, I'm not endorsing it, but it's hard to ignore the fact that Escobar's dark past has become a source of intrigue and fascination for many. The impact of his criminal activities, however, is not to be taken lightly. The drug trade he once spearheaded continues to plague Colombia and the world, leaving behind a trail of violence and societal unrest. His actions have left an indelible mark on the world, shaping policies and influencing pop culture. Even in death, Escobar has become a symbol of the destructive power of unchecked ambition and greed, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of the drug trade. His life and death continue to be a subject of study, inspiring countless books, movies, and television series. Pablo Escobar, a man who built an empire, left a legacy that still echoes today. Until next time, keep digging into history.